Welcome to our exploration of the science of behavior, a fascinating section of psychology known as behaviorism. This school of thought emphasizes the study of observable behavior and focuses on how environmental factors influence our actions. Unlike other approaches, behaviorism rejects the significance of internal mental states, such as thoughts and feelings. Instead, it proposes that all behavior is learned through interaction with the environment. The impact of this approach has been profound, enhancing our understanding of both human and animal behavior. Behaviorism traces back to the work of early psychologists like Ivan Pavlov and John B. Watson. Pavlov's experiments with dogs showcased the principles of classical conditioning, while Watson emphasized the role of environmental factors in shaping behavior. Another key figure, B.F. Skinner, developed the theory of operant conditioning, highlighting the importance of reinforcement and punishment in learning. Applied across various fields like education, therapy, and animal training, behaviorism has offered valuable insights into how we learn, form habits, and modify behavior. By understanding the principles of behaviorism, we gain a better understanding of ourselves and the world around us. This study offers a scientific approach to understanding human actions and provides a framework for analyzing and predicting behavior based on observable events. This approach has been instrumental in developing effective methods for behavior modification and has contributed significantly to our understanding of learning and motivation. Now, let's delve into classical conditioning. Learning by association. This type of learning occurs when a neutral stimulus becomes associated with a meaningful stimulus, leading to a learned response. This process was first demonstrated by Ivan Pavlov in his experiments with dogs. Pavlov observed that dogs naturally salivate in response to food, an unconditioned stimulus. In his experiment, a bell, initially a neutral stimulus, was repeatedly paired with the presentation of food. Over time, the dogs began to associate the bell with the food, and as a result, the bell alone began to elicit salivation, even in the absence of food. This learned response to the bell is known as the conditioned response, and the bell became a conditioned stimulus. Classical conditioning is a fundamental learning process that plays a role in many aspects of our lives, helping us understand how we develop fears, phobias, and emotional responses to certain stimuli. For example, if someone has a negative experience with a particular type of food, they may develop an aversion to that food in the future. This type of learning highlights the power of association in shaping our behavior and demonstrates how seemingly unrelated stimuli can become linked in our minds, leading to learned responses. Understanding classical conditioning can help us recognize and modify our own learned behaviors. Moving on to operant conditioning, learning through consequences. This type of learning modifies behavior by its consequences, focusing on the relationship between actions and their outcomes. B.F. Skinner proposed that behaviors followed by positive consequences are more likely to be repeated, while those followed by negative consequences are less likely to be repeated. Operant conditioning involves three key elements: antecedent, behavior, and consequence. The antecedent refers to the environmental cues or stimuli that precede the behavior. The behavior is the action or response exhibited by the individual. The consequence is the outcome that follows the behavior, which can be either reinforcing or punishing. Reinforcement increases the likelihood of a behavior being repeated. Positive reinforcement involves presenting a desirable stimulus after a behavior, like receiving a reward for completing a task. Negative reinforcement involves removing an aversive stimulus after a behavior, like taking away a chore for good behavior. Punishment, on the other hand, decreases the likelihood of a behavior being repeated. Positive punishment involves presenting an aversive stimulus after a behavior, like receiving a scolding for misbehaving. Negative punishment involves removing a desirable stimulus after a behavior, like losing privileges for breaking a rule. Finally, let's explore shaping behavior, a step-by-step approach. Shaping is a technique used in operant conditioning to teach complex behaviors by breaking them down into smaller, more manageable steps. This involves reinforcing successive approximations of the desired behavior until the final behavior is achieved. The gradual process allows individuals to learn complex skills that would be difficult or impossible to acquire all at once. The process of shaping begins by identifying the target behavior, the final behavior that is desired. Then the starting behavior, the individual's current behavior, is determined. The next step involves identifying a series of intermediate behaviors that progressively resemble the target behavior. These intermediate behaviors serve as stepping stones towards the final goal. Reinforcement is then used to encourage the individual to move from one intermediate behavior to the next. Each time the individual exhibits an approximation of the target behavior, they are rewarded. This reinforcement strengthens the association between the behavior and the positive consequence. As the individual progresses through the intermediate behaviors, the criteria for reinforcement become more stringent. Only behaviors that more closely resemble the target behavior are rewarded. This gradual increase in the difficulty level ensures that the individual continues to learn and refine their skills. The principles of classical and operant conditioning have numerous applications in real-world settings. These theories have been instrumental in developing effective strategies for behavior modification, training, and therapy. In education, operant conditioning is used to promote positive classroom behaviors and academic performance. Teachers use reinforcement techniques, such as praise and rewards, to encourage students to participate in class, complete their assignments, and achieve good grades. Punishment, such as timeouts or loss of privileges, may be used to discourage disruptive behaviors. In therapy, classical conditioning is used to treat phobias and anxiety disorders. Techniques such as systematic desensitization gradually expose individuals to feared stimuli while pairing them with relaxation techniques. This process helps to extinguish the learned fear response. Operant conditioning techniques, such as token economies, are used to reinforce desired behaviors in individuals with developmental disabilities or mental health conditions. Animal training relies heavily on the principles of operant conditioning. Trainers use positive reinforcement, such as treats and praise, to teach animals specific behaviors. Shaping is often used to train animals for complex tasks, such as performing tricks or assisting people with disabilities. Punishment is generally avoided in animal training, as it can be stressful for the animal and may not be effective in modifying behavior. Reinforcement is a fundamental concept in operant conditioning. It refers to any consequence that increases the likelihood of a behavior being repeated. Reinforcement can be either positive or negative. Positive reinforcement involves the presentation of a desirable stimulus following a behavior, while negative reinforcement involves the removal of an aversive stimulus following a behavior. Positive reinforcement is a powerful tool for shaping behavior. When a behavior is followed by a positive consequence, such as a reward or praise, it becomes more likely that the individual will repeat that behavior in the future. For example, if a child receives a sticker for completing their homework, they are more likely to complete their homework in the future to receive another sticker. Negative reinforcement is also effective in strengthening behavior. When a behavior is followed by the removal of an aversive stimulus, such as a loud noise or an unpleasant chore, it becomes more likely that the individual will repeat that behavior to avoid the aversive stimulus in the future. For example, if a student is excused from doing dishes for getting a good grade, they are more likely to strive for good grades in the future to avoid doing dishes. The effectiveness of reinforcement depends on several factors, including the type of reinforcer used, the schedule of reinforcement, and the individual's motivation. Different individuals may respond differently to different types of reinforcers. Some individuals may be motivated by tangible rewards, while others may be motivated by social praise or recognition. Section 7. Punishment, decreasing undesirable behaviors. Punishment is a consequence that decreases the likelihood of a behavior being repeated. It can be either positive or negative. Positive punishment involves the presentation of an aversive stimulus following a behavior, while negative punishment involves the removal of a desirable stimulus following a behavior. Positive punishment is often used to deter undesirable behaviors. When a behavior is followed by an aversive consequence, such as a scolding or a fine, it becomes less likely that the individual will repeat that behavior in the future. For example, if a child is scolded for hitting their sibling, they are less likely to hit their sibling again to avoid being scolded. Negative punishment can also be effective in reducing undesirable behaviors. When a behavior is followed by the removal of a desirable stimulus, such as a favorite toy or a privilege, it becomes less likely that the individual will repeat that behavior to avoid losing the desirable stimulus in the future. For example, if a teenager is grounded for breaking curfew, they are less likely to break curfew again to avoid being grounded. Punishment can be an effective behavior modification technique, but it should be used with caution. Punishment can have negative side effects, such as increasing aggression, fear, and avoidance. It is important to use punishment sparingly and to combine it with reinforcement for desired behaviors. By understanding the principles of punishment and reinforcement, educators and parents can effectively manage and guide behavior in a positive direction. Section 8. The ethics of behavioral modification. The application of behavioral modification techniques raises ethical considerations. While these techniques can be effective in changing behavior, it is crucial to use them responsibly and ethically. One ethical concern is the potential for coercion. Behavioral modification techniques should not be used to manipulate or control individuals against their will. Consent and autonomy are essential ethical principles that should be respected. Individuals should have the right to choose whether or not to participate in behavior modification programs. Another ethical consideration is the potential for harm. Punishment techniques, in particular, can have negative side effects. It is important to weigh the potential benefits of punishment against the potential risks. Punishment should be used sparingly, and only when other methods have been ineffective. The use of behavioral modification techniques should be transparent and accountable. Individuals should be informed about the techniques being used and the intended goals of the intervention. Data should be collected to monitor the effectiveness of the intervention and to ensure that it is not causing harm. Ethical guidelines and professional standards have been developed to guide the responsible use of behavioral modification techniques. These guidelines emphasize the importance of informed consent, respect for individual autonomy, and the avoidance of harm. Section 9. The power of conditioning in everyday life. Conditioning processes play a significant role in our everyday lives, shaping our behaviors, habits, and preferences. Classical and operant conditioning are constantly at work, influencing our actions and reactions to the world around us. Advertising relies heavily on classical conditioning to create positive associations with products and brands. By pairing products with appealing images, music, and celebrities, advertisers aim to elicit positive emotional responses in consumers. These positive associations can influence purchasing decisions, even if consumers are not consciously aware of the conditioning process. Our daily routines are often shaped by operant conditioning. We learn to perform certain behaviors because they are followed by positive consequences. For example, we wake up at a certain time because we know it will allow us to get to work on time and avoid negative consequences, such as being late or losing our job. Social interactions are also influenced by conditioning processes. We learn to behave in certain ways because of the social rewards and punishments we receive. For example, we learn to be polite and respectful because these behaviors are generally met with positive social responses, while rude or aggressive behaviors are often met with negative social responses. Understanding the principles of conditioning can empower us to make conscious choices about our behaviors. By recognizing the environmental cues and consequences that influence our actions, we can take steps to modify our behaviors and develop healthier habits. Section 10. Conclusion. Understanding human behavior. Behaviorism has provided valuable insights into the mechanisms of learning and behavior modification. Classical and operant conditioning are fundamental learning processes that shape our actions, habits, and preferences. By understanding these principles, we can gain a deeper understanding of human behavior and develop effective strategies for behavior change. Classical conditioning highlights the power of association in learning. It demonstrates how neutral stimuli can acquire meaning through repeated pairing with meaningful stimuli, leading to learned responses. Operant conditioning emphasizes the role of consequences in shaping behavior. It shows how reinforcement and punishment can strengthen or weaken behaviors, respectively. The principles of conditioning have numerous applications in real-world settings, including education, therapy, and animal training. These principles have been instrumental in developing effective strategies for behavior modification.
Want to rise to your full potential in your studies and revise like a boss? You can trust Study Guide today to have you covered. Subscribe to this channel and see our website linked in the description of this video to see revision articles to maximize your study gains.